attention and the concept that attention is the new interest rate, and how you compete for trust in a digital economy. So super excited to see you again.
Yes.
And have a good one.
Cool. Thank you for having me. Can everybody hear me okay? Right after lunch, we're all full of sandwiches and potatoes, and now you're like, holy shit, a bald bearded guy's going to yell at me about data. You guys pulled the short straw. We're just going to put that out there. So I have 55 slides and 30 minutes, and I'm not going to do public math, but I don't like that ratio. So just know that as we're going through, there's QR codes, so if you want to download the deck, you can. At the very end, there'll be a big fat QR code to download the deck, because I want to kind of keep it moving, and also I don't want to put you to sleep, because I know that those sandwiches can put you to sleep. So we're going to talk about attention today, and attention being the new interest rate. I run a firm called RightMetric, and so we're a research firm. We focus on something called Outsight, which I'm going to get into in a second. But my journey to working in research, I actually worked on the consumer side at Red Bull, Aritzia, and Arc'teryx. For the women in the room, I know it's insane that I used to work at Aritzia. I probably don't strike you as an Aritzia girl. For the guys in the room, that's like working at Zara. And so, yeah, a lot of this stuff that we're going to talk about are principles that I learned there that now I have kind of built into this business, and we work with across a bunch of different sectors, financial being one of them. So we always get asked, the research that I'm going to show you today, how do we do it? We buy data. So we've gone out and bought access to a whole bunch of different data sets, digital data sets. We land it all in one place. We have our own kind of proprietary tech, and then some analysts and strategists who can take that into learnings and then distill it in a way that we can all understand so it's not buried in a dashboard somewhere. So I said that word Outsight. This is kind of what you all look like right now. What does that mean? Outsight. This is what the dictionary definition of outsight is: the power or act of perceiving external things. Now, when we think about that from a marketing perspective, let's actually get real here, because we as marketers do a really shitty job of using buzzwords, so let's actually get specific. It's this idea of how can we use external signals, whether that's audience behavior, competitor moves, cultural trends, platform changes, etc. How can we use those signals to eliminate blind spots? Because we all have blind spots. In our personal lives, but also in our businesses, right? So when I say that word blind spot, this is also kind of you again, without actually saying it. What do I mean when I say digital blind spots? We're going to put them, there's so many different types of blind spots, but we're going to put them into a few buckets. Number one is audiences, right? So if we think about some of these questions, are we meeting our target audience where they actually spend time online? What are they paying attention to that we're not part of, right? And how are their habits or interests starting to change? Right? Where this came from is we all probably have those persona decks that are dusty in a filing cabinet somewhere that we paid some consulting firm 5 years ago a shitload of money. We were really excited about it for about 2 weeks, and then we haven't looked at them again, right? We all have those. I had those when I worked on the brand side. A lot of our customers still have those, right? So this idea of we're in this space now where we can actually look at behaviors of people more broadly and start to eliminate these blind spots. We're going to get into that in a second. Second set of blind spots is competitors. Quick show of hands, who here follows their competitors? Cool, thank you. If someone ever tells you not to look at your competitors or don't follow your competitors, please don't listen. That's just dumbass advice. Don't be dumb, okay? But, so, who's actually growing the fastest or the most in our space and why? This question, I was on the receiving end of this when I used to work on the brand side. I'd get an email from someone who wasn't working in marketing. They would forward me something from another company and go, oh, this company's killing it. Were they killing it? Is there any data point besides them saying, I like this and I shared it? We've all probably been on the receiving end of that, right? Where someone goes, super high up person goes, why aren't we doing this? And you're like, this is an Adweek article. Why are you sending me this? This doesn't make sense, right? So looking at competitors and having these blind spots, oftentimes we have these large blind spots because we don't have access to the data. Number one, we didn't know it even existed. Number two, you actually have to go out there and gather it and harness it, right? So by looking at competitors, we can start to see different strategies, different tactics. And then the third piece of this is there anything that they're doing that we could realistically take? This is something that I think most marketers need to work on. We don't always have to reinvent the wheel. I used to work in marketing at Red Bull. When I left there in 2017, I'm going to talk to you about the scale of the organization. We had 400 social media accounts. We had 200 million followers. We had 1,000 social media managers around the world. And we were publishing 650 times a day. When I left there in 2017, we were the most shared brand on the internet, period, full stop. all of our time was spent looking at what was happening. We weren't sitting there being like, oh, this has been done before. We could never do that. We were constantly looking for information and inspiration across the board, right? So as marketers, I think we don't do ourselves any favors by sitting there being like, oh, we can't do that because they do that. Everything's a remix. There's a really great TED Talk that you should go watch where everything's a remix. So the last thing we're going to talk about here is content. We've heard a lot about content throughout the entire conference, right? Content as a line item in a marketing budget is huge. And typically it's been, hey, we spend a lot of money on it, we toss it over to the creatives, hopefully they make us something that's on brief, and then we put it back out and hopefully it performs, right? Now we're able to see more from a content perspective. So do we actually know what's resonating with our audience across specific platforms? Which topics or formats are gaining momentum? Or what's the white space that we can own before others, right? So these are all the kind of blind spots and questions that we all face when we're sitting there in marketing day to day. And there's probably more questions, but for the sake of keeping it short, we kind of had to keep it like this. And so this is a quote it's always been misattributed to Mark Twain, but this quote, it isn't what we don't know that gives us trouble, it's what we think we know that just ain't so, right? It's what we think we know that just ain't so. And so I got my start actually in video production. My high school math teacher would probably be laughing knowing that I run a research and analytics company now because I was a C- math student. But I think what's really interesting about this is we all have biases, we all have assumptions, you know. I've worked in this industry for 20 years, I know best. I think I can tell you from 8 years running this company, my company has output over 1 million pages of research across sectors. The biggest learning I've had is I don't know shit. Anytime I have a stereotype in my mind where I'm like, oh, this is surely how, you know, middle American moms behave around XYZ topic, I'm completely wrong, right? So this is really, really important. And the good news is that there's data now at our fingertips so we can start to see things. And so how do we clear these blind spots? Traditionally, we kind of did, this is kind of a rough timeline, right? We would do focus groups, then we would do surveys, right? And how I describe surveys is we get a bunch of weirdos in a room, we ask them some questions, they lie to us, and then we take that as gospel and go run marketing shit that doesn't work. Everybody lies. Everybody lies. I lie, you lie, we all lie. There's a really great book by a New Yorker. It's called Everybody Lies. Seth Stevens-Dewitowitz. Fantastic book. He was a former data scientist at Google. And the whole point of that book is Google search data is the most important data set in the history of human psychology. Because there are things that we have all typed into Google that we will never say out loud to another human being. I probably did that this morning, right? So did you. So anyway, we get through this kind of, you know, focus group survey stuff, then we get to social listening, then that whole kind of Cambridge Analytica thing happened, so that kind of ruined everything for everybody. And now we're getting to this kind of interesting point in time with behavioral signals at scale, right? And I'm gonna show you some data sets and some tools because there are some really expensive tools, but there's also some really affordable tools that you can start to use to dig into more of this stuff, right? So as you can probably tell based on what I just said, I'm a big believer in don't ask people what they think, measure what they do. Now, obviously, I'm not saying stop all conversations with customers or people, but think about how much emphasis you're actually putting on that opinion that you're getting from that person, right? And are they actually telling you the truth or not? So I want to talk about this concept of insight outsight, right? Because we've heard people talk about, oh, that's insightful, that's insightful. Let's actually kind of get into how we see this at RightMetrics. So insight, this is kind of what we already do, right? So it's internal data, right? We look in our CRM, we look at our web analytics, we look at social, we look at campaigns. This shows us what's happening with our existing group of people that we're reaching, whether those customers or prospects or whatever, right? And this is really used to kind of optimize and refine what we're already doing, right? So this is what happens inside your brand's digital ecosystem. Outside, on the other hand, is the same thing, just looking externally, right? So can we look at different signals, external signals, right? Audience behavior. And when I say audience behavior, I mean people who are not your existing customer yet. People who are out there that we all as marketers are tasked with reaching, right? How are they behaving, right? What can we see from competitors? What are we seeing in terms of content trends and cultural trends, right? That actually allows us to get more specific about how we can go out and drive growth, right? And also what's gaining traction. Then that also allows us to look at white space and guide kind of what we do next, right? So when we think about insight outside, insight is what happens inside your brand's digital ecosystems and the learnings that you can get from your data. Outside is the same thing, but using relevant external data, right? So that's how we think about it. And so, if you only look inward, you miss what's changing around you. And that actually means you're flying blind. Quick story. So when I used to work at Aritzia, every Monday morning, I would sit with Brian Hill, the CEO. And it was a new month, and I was running social at the time. We had just had a killer month. Like, every metric was, like, up and to the right. And I was like, I am so dope. Like, I am so great at my job. This is awesome. Come in, and Brian's a pretty intense guy. And he's kind of kicking back, and I talk through. I'm like, yeah, you know, this is up, this is up, this is up, this is up. And he goes, okay. So you're saying we're up 20% here? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, what's the category up? And I was like, well, I don't have access to that data. And he's like, well, if the category's up 80%, I should fire you. And he was like, but if the category's up 5%, I should give you a raise. And he was right. But I was flying half blind. I didn't know, because I didn't have any contextual reference point. I had my dashboard that made me feel really good. I loved my dashboards, right? We all love our dashboards. It's a nice number that goes up and to the right. So this is why it's important to look externally. So I want to get more specific here. We talk about looking externally. We can look at externally at so many different things. There's really 3 buckets. We're going to look at content today in the actual examples that I'm going to give you. So we can look at our audience externally, a target audience, right? We can look at competitors, right? And these are some of the questions and blind spots that we can answer. And I know this is a lot of text. That's why I said you can download the deck at the end. And then we can also look at content, right? And the beauty of the world that we're in now is everywhere we publish content, there's so much signal that comes back to us, right? The things that we can actually see from a content performance perspective are crazy. Now, this is the slide that I was going to say about data points. This is where all that data can come from. There's a whole bunch of different, some of these are hundreds of thousands a year, some of these are free, right? So like, step 1 is just understanding this data exists. It's just a matter of if we're going to actually use it, count it, pull meaning from it, and have it help us make strategic decisions, right? So this is like a little bit of setup for what we're going to get into around content. So let's talk about content. This was me this morning doing a cold plunge. You imagine if I wore that suit up here? Crazy. Cool. So we're going to dive into content. So this idea, right? The title of the talk is, you know, attention is the new interest rate, right? Growth no longer compounds in savings account, it compounds in attention, right? Attention is so important. It is so competitive out there, and whether we believe it or not as financial services, we aren't just competing with each other here in the room. You're competing with Red Bull. You're competing with BuzzFeed. You're competing with Complex. You're competing with media companies. You're competing with Netflix, whether you believe it or not, because there's only 24 hours in a day, and we only have 2 eyes and 1 brain, and maybe we can be doing 2 screens at once if we're really tech, but like, there's only so much time. There's a supply and demand issue. So you're actually competing more with indirect competitors now moving forward. So we're going to look at 3 things. Our team did a content analysis around these 3 buckets. So I'm going to kind of set the stage. We're going to look at credit cards, we're going to look at SBA loans, small business financing, and mortgages. The way that we did our content analysis, we'll talk about credit cards first. So this is looking at every piece of social video content about credit cards in North America across Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube in 2025. Okay, so what our team does is we can throw a big lasso around credit card content, and we bring it all into one place, and then we can start to do analysis on it. So these are the top content themes in the credit card space. Now, these themes that we're looking at here, perks in action, everyday card hacks, once we lasso all that content, we start watching all of that content, and we can actually start to bucket in what are the themes that come together, and then we actually look at performance. So what we're looking at here is average performance here is 128,000 views and engagements. That's average. So what we do is we pull all that content into one place, pull together the themes, and then put those themes on a graph. Pretty straightforward. So, number 1, this is what is getting views and attention. We didn't cherry pick any brands. We literally went out there and we're like, if it is about a credit card, is it generating eyeballs? This is what it is, in order. Kind of interesting. So now let's dig into a few, like we'll double click into a few of these things. So perks in action, right? So what we're looking at is this content theme versus industry average. So this is overperforming. If the industry average is 128,000 views and engagements, this one is overperforming. Now, tactically, if you download the deck, you can actually click into these like examples here on the bottom just to see what the content actually looks like. The two things that our team noticed from looking at all this content that is performing and earning attention: don't tell people, show them, right? It doesn't have to be super polished. And they were very, very neat. It's niche creators who are creating this stuff. There's going to be a big learning, I think, that we see throughout this. The top performing content across all of these things is actually produced by creators. Now, I can hear some people being like, well, we're regulated and we can't work with creators. That's not the point. The point is, creators are better at content than us. I used to think I was hot shit at Red Bull, but creators were better at producing content than we were at Red Bull. So what did we do? We spent a ton of time studying what creators were doing from a content perspective and learning and pulling their strategies and tactics into what we were doing. That's what we should be thinking about here, right? Because at the end of the day, the creator's content is their product. That's what they sell. That's how they get all of you to work with. That's how they get their brand deals, is the content has to be good and perform and earn attention. So what we're going to see, this first example is like, yeah, creator content. You're going to see it all the way through for mortgages, small business, etc. Okay? So, perks in action. Next one was everyday card hacks. Again, you might not be able to replicate this. I'm not saying, hey, go and replicate this tomorrow, but it's just getting an understanding. This is where the attention is. So what could you do? Could you buy ads around content like this? Right? Could you seed them product? Like, there's so many different ways that you could think about this. And so, again, the big kind of key takeaway here was they were conveying a ton of value in a short amount of time, right? So they were always one video for one key takeaway. Not how many benefits can we plug into one 60-second ad. No. One thing, one main point, one main thing. And they would create multiple pieces of content like that. So that's everyday card hacks. And then smart switchers. This was kind of the other thing. And so, again, they were leaning into culture here. And what you're seeing is this kind of green screen style, like unpolished, right? You see this woman has a microphone, like the kind of lav mic trend that we're all seeing. They're leaning into that. So the takeaway for us here as marketers is when we think about our content, this is what's earning eyeballs, right? This isn't Charlie just cherry picking, hey, here's what I think you should do because I think it's cool. This is actually us going, we've looked at every single piece of content in North America about this, and here's what's getting views, right? So it's not me, it's actually the audience is telling you what they're paying attention to. Then it's up to us to get creative and go, how can I write better briefs, right? How can I produce better content? How can we be more effective with our efforts? So the kind of key content learnings for credit cards, show, don't sell, right? So how can you actually get people to speak about it in their own way? Simplicity scales trust, right? So one single thing per clip. Don't try and ram in as many product features into one thing. And then the A word, authenticity. God, I hate that shit, but it's the right word. How can you actually work with people who have a loyal following? And this is something that from a creator or an influencer perspective, don't get lost in the middle. This is something when I got to Aritzia, we got lost in the middle. And what I meant by that was we were spending the majority of our creator budget on influencers and creators who were anywhere from like 100,000 to 1 million followers. And what we actually found was when we did an audit and looked back, the best performing creators for us were micro creators, which what we called them, sub 10,000 audience, and Kardashians. So the strategy was like, turn off all that shit in the middle and only do Kardashians and then super, super small, locally relevant creators within different scenes, right? Same thing here. How are we niching down? So let's talk about loans and small business. So again, these are the top content themes in that space. So again, we're looking at the average performance here, 500,000 views and engagements, right? That's average. Real economics of small business, wealth from boring businesses, the rise of lifestyle businesses, celebrity wealth archetypes, etc. Now, we're going to notice something here. When we get into the content, what do you know? Another creator. Does anybody here follow Cody? 1, 2. She's really interesting. She's blown up. She's kind of like the Gary Vee of acquiring small, older legacy businesses. Like, hey, this is why you should go buy the laundromats in your city and roll them up, etc. Anyway, so Cody has done a really great job. And again, this is an example of just a creator. Now, I'm not saying necessarily go out and partner with Cody, but I'm like, you could absolutely buy ads around Cody's content. She's got the eyeballs there, right? And so the things that come from a content perspective is They break down how real businesses earn and keep profit and get into like the nitty-gritty of operations because this audience is typically kind of craving that sort of stuff. They get into fundamentals and they lead with curiosity. So they're not these kind of like big fancy kind of campaign things. Some of the hooks, how this gas station actually makes money. I didn't know I was interested in that. Probably the person who watches that didn't know they were interested in that, but like there they are spending time, right? So I think we as marketers tend to over-polish things when really this is how people are consuming, right? It's a bit more raw, it's a bit more real. So, wealth from boring businesses, again, very straightforward. One of the things here from a trend perspective is that numbers build trust. So what Cody does a really great job of is she'll literally show her P&Ls of things. Now, obviously, as a financial services institution, you might not be able to do that, but I think the learning here is how can we get very, very specific and real with people and use numbers to communicate what we're trying to show here, right? And then also, systems. System thinking. This is actually tapping into another niche. Are there any like digital productivity nerds out here like who love Notion and like setting up their note-taking app? Cool, there's like one or two. We are the same. Tapping into this, right? Like operational systems from a business perspective. And so some of the stuff that Cody and other creators are creating is like, here's the system that I built for my business. And people are eating that content up. Right? We as financial institutions probably have an opportunity to create and share systems as well. So the kind of learnings from a content perspective here, entrepreneurship through acquisition. So creators are actually starting to make small business M&A feel doable. Like Cody has now written a book that talks about, hey, you want to buy the local laundromat? Here's how you go and buy the local laundromat. And here's how you can get seller financing or whatever. That's amazing for us as financial professionals. They're the ones who are kind of starting to stoke this demand and sell that kind of like opportunity. And cool, how can we actually have our brand show up right there so that when someone is actually ready to do that, maybe they come and work with us on it, right? She opens the books and they open the books. I think transparency is huge here. I get it, it's different from a bank perspective. And then just leaning into creators. I know that creators are tough for certain industries based on regulation to work with. We work with a bunch of different industries. There are ways around it. And again, I'm not saying you have to work with a creator, but I'm saying look at them for inspiration, buy ads around their content, think about creative ways that you can work with those people, right? And task your teams with doing that. So last one here, we're going to look at mortgages. I have a couple minutes left here. So from a mortgage perspective, top content themes in the mortgage space. This is a little lower. I just renewed my mortgage, so maybe mortgages might not be the most exciting thing. What we're looking at here, the average, and I know I'm pointing this out because it's just kind of hard to see on the screen. Average views and engagement for this niche is 43,000 views and engagements. And these were the top content themes. Now, again, I'm not saying go out and copy these content themes. I'm just telling you, here's what's getting views. Here's where the attention is. It's up to us to go, oh, do we actually want our brand to inject ourselves into that conversation or not? And again, the idea here isn't go do this. It might be, hey, yeah, cool, that's happening. We're not going to touch that, but we're going to watch it, right? So, affordability crisis. This was what was really interesting. Again, it's more creator-focused stuff, and that's why I bring up this creator conversation, is that we're talking about things that are super relevant to our businesses, yet I haven't actually showed you a brand example in here, right? That's an issue. That's a big opportunity as well, right? Because if there is a brand that starts to produce content in this way that can get around it, God, the sky's the limit. The audience is there, right? So this was one where from a mortgage perspective, it actually skews longer, right? So longer narrative delivery. What we noticed is the top performing content was anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes, which is interesting because everything else I said was like shorter, 1 minute, one kind of key takeaway, whatever. But if you think about the psychology of the buyer or someone who's interested in learning about this, they want to go down the rabbit hole because it's a big purchase for them, right? So it's cool just to see. We all probably know that as individuals, but it's cool to see that play out actually in the data. Reality check. So this was actually some skit stuff. This is a viral outlier, this one on the left here. 3.7 million views and engagements on YouTube, right? And it's kind of this like skit form of content. Again, not necessarily saying you should do this, but generating eyeballs seems to be working pretty well, right? And it's being relatable, right? It's understanding how you can actually convey and meet people where they're at, right? Understanding how we can actually provide something to them to go, hey, they actually see me. They're not just this stale thing that I have to kind of engage with. One other thing is that they're very focused on hooks here. So when it says outrage hooks, under 60-second clips open with punchlines that highlight absurd moments and keep viewers watching. Does anybody here know when I say the word visual hook, do you know what that means? That means like the first 2 seconds on the screen, okay? I'll give you a bit of context. When I left Red Bull in 2017, we had just hired our first 2 thumbnail people. Thumbnail people. Not video editors, not photographers, thumbnails. That's all they do. Mr. Beast, the biggest YouTuber in the world, has a 10-person thumbnail team. He wouldn't be spending money on a 10-person thumbnail team if the thumbnail and the first second or 2 didn't matter, right? Red Bull's still a customer of my company. The amount of time they obsess over the first 1 second, 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds is crazy. It's crazy, but it matters because that's how competitive it is. And Red Bull actually has it easy. They're having people jump out of planes and shit. Like, it's already crazy content. And that's how maniacal they are about it, because they know it's that intense from a competition perspective, right? Last thing here is expert financing tips. So this one, I was kind of on the fence whether to include this, because it only outperformed the average a little bit. But I just thought what was really cool here is the style of video. So the main thing I want to show here is you can see these videos they're produced in a way that's kind of like this like TikTok style with like visuals and kind of all that. I just think that there's so much that we can do from a graphics perspective to convey what's going on. And I just thought it was really interesting because this is something where, hey, we all have experts probably in our business that, you know, hey, this person's a thought leader, this advisor, whatever. Use this as a blueprint to help script out and figure out what they should be posting and how it's edited and how it's briefed in and all of that. So, my clicker might have died. Nope, just kidding, we're back. So, the kind of content learnings for mortgages, lean into humor, right? When people laugh, they start to trust you. Why do you think I swear a lot? Right? Why do you think I make dumbass jokes? I'm trying to connect with you. But we also view that when we're consuming content, oftentimes humor is a great way to communicate with our audience, right? Skits and role-playing. This is really interesting. Taking out, like, make fun of situations, right? We're all probably thinking through something where we're like, yeah, this process of getting a mortgage is a pain in the ass. Let's make a skit about it that pokes fun at it, right? And this ultimately is trying to help humanize, what we're trying to do, right? We all talk about in financial services how we can be partners to people. How can we truly actually take our big global brands or our big national brands or wherever we're working, and how do we make it super hyper locally relevant? That's something that our team really tried to focus on at Red Bull. How do we take this big global behemoth and make it super relevant to all the different audiences and geographies that we spend time with? So I want to leave you with 3 kind of macro key takeaways here. So number 1, show, don't sell. We've talked about this from a content perspective. I think Walter from Goldman Sachs yesterday talked a lot about how important it is to create content not for the sake of just selling. Like, how are we creating content that entertains people and educates people and keeps them, how can we talk as a brand without just selling? Exercise to go through is, if you as a brand were tasked with talking, but you weren't allowed to say, buy my product and service, what would you say? It's a really interesting exercise. Okay, so show, don't sell. Number 2, simplicity scales trust. Finance can be complex. Most people, if you were crappy at high school math like me, you think money, you think math, you think, oh shit, I sucked at that. Mr. Lim would kill me knowing how bad I am at this, right? So how can you actually simplify things down, right? And I think editorializing and being really, really ruthless about using better language, again, within regulations that we can use to meet people where they're at. A great example of this is Chime. We did a teardown for Chime, and we showed it in Chicago at the other one of these conferences. Go look at their channels and what they do. They've been able to get around a whole bunch of regulations, and the language that they use is really, really interesting. And finally, this concept of attention is the new interest rate, right? We've talked about, okay, like, people only kind of go because the rate is the best. Yes, people, of course, still look at rates, but this idea of attention is critical. It's super, super important for us. Right? If we can get people to spend time with our brand, there's a greater likelihood that in the future they will transact with us. And you know what? If we look at all the best brands in the world, that's what they do. At Red Bull, Whether you bought the sugar water or not from us, you were going to spend time with our brand. You were going to follow us on social. You were going to go to our website. You were going to watch Red Bull TV across connected television, right? You were going to spend time with us. Now, I hope that when you need a boost, instead of going to a coffee shop, you were going into a 7-Eleven and you'd walk over to the cooler and grab a Red Bull, but there was no way for us to track that. But what we were betting on was that if people spent time with us, that tide would raise all boats. So, one more thing. We're going to give away what we call rival reports. So everyone here, we've never done this before. It's free. We charge our customers 25 grand for this. You have 24 hours if you can get a copy of this deck, and literally someone from our team will just get in touch and be like, hey, what competitors do you want to tear down? We'll fully tear down, give you all the data. It's a really cool thing. We use this as a diagnostic tool for a lot of our customers. And yeah, somehow our team was like, we should give this to the gang at DMFS. So if you scan that URL, you can get this deck as well as your free rival report. And with that, I'm around the rest of the day. My email's here, charlie@rightmetric.co. You can find me on LinkedIn, connectwithcharlie.ca because I'm Canadian. Yeah, thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, sorry, Charlie. We've got to move people around. That was a